Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this workshop. I feel quite privileged to be sharing with you this afternoon. My name is Matthew Salinger, and I'm the CEO for ADRA New Zealand. I've been in the role for 6 months now, so not too long. And while I'm new to ADRA New Zealand, I'm not new to the ADRA work. I've been in this ministry for 7 years, serving mostly as a marketing director for ADRA Australia, based at the division office. And I'm just really happy to be in New Zealand, serving in a ministry that I love, but in a country that I'm absolutely passionate about. And one of the reasons why I chose to come back to New Zealand is because I just wanted the opportunity to work with my own people here in New Zealand. So it's been a real blessing. This morning I've been asked to share a little bit about reaching out to your community. But I think before I do that, what I need to do, because this is the year of, this is the 150th year anniversary for our church. Did you know that? Okay, so we've read things in the record. We've probably seen some big banners talking about the heritage, the history of our church. But I'm sad to say I haven't actually seen one banner or one article that talks about the history of ADRA. Like we've learned about the history of our health ministry. We learned about the history of education ministry, but nothing about ADRA. So I'm going to give you some of that this afternoon. We started in 1956. Do you know what we were called in 1956? Dorcas? Good guess. It is a guess. Yeah. SAWS. Have you heard of SAWS? Seventh-day Adventist Welfare Service. 1956, the church said, we need to do something to share the love of God with other people. And that became our ministry for doing that. And then in 1983, the church came together in a global assembly and they said, we really have to rethink this helping people business. Because Seventh-day Adventist Welfare Service, yeah, sure, we're able to help people out, but we're actually giving them handouts. We're not giving them a hand up. So the rethink, when they had the rethink, they came to a decision that we need to be an organisation that can actually give somebody a hand up where they won't need our support again. So if we're going to support somebody, we'll help them as much as we can within 3 to 5 years, with the goal that we don't want to see them again. Because if we have to see them again, then we haven't done our jobs properly the first time. And that's when we became the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, with a focus specifically on responding to disasters, which is an area our church know well. But that second area, if not one of the most important areas, is developing communities so they can be self-sufficient, self-sustainable. And I'm happy to say that in 30 years, that was in 1983, now it's 2013. In 30 years, we're now in over 125 countries. Praise God, huh? I'll give you another number. 31 million people. That's how many people we supported last year alone. Your small church, humble ministry called ADRA supported over 31 million people around the world, and it cost our church $500 million. So that's the impact that your church is making every single day around the world in over 125 countries. In terms of the New Zealand picture, we are an organisation. We have 9 staff. I have 9 staff here in New Zealand. We're based just up the road here in Royal Oak at the sanitarium office. And we have a few hundred staff in the field. So we have a program of about $10 million. And we support 10 countries in the South Pacific and in Southeast Asia. We also support 2 countries in North Asia, Mongolia and Nepal. But we also run projects right here in New Zealand. Which I'm quite shocked, though, because when I speak to some church people, I say, do you know that ADRA does work in your own country, in your own backyard? We have 40 projects in New Zealand. And this morning I want to share a little bit about those projects too. So just going back to topic, in reaching out to your community, I think we first need to establish a few things. And the thing that I want to establish is this. What is the case for doing so? Okay, now that's a business term. What's the case for reaching out? Okay, the why. Why are we to do it as a church? And in exploring this, I've come up with 3 points that I want to share with you. And the first point is this. Quite simply, it's what God requires of us. It's as simple as that. I've got this Bible at home, and we've highlighted every single text that speaks about God's heart for the poor, about his major dislike for injustice. Do you know how many texts have been highlighted in that Bible? 2,103. Was that a coincidence? No, it's deliberate. Because God was absolutely passionate about this topic, about this thing called helping the poor, meeting those people's needs. He's absolutely passionate about that. And I can't share the 2,103 with you, but I will share two. Matthew 10, verse 6 to 8. This is Jesus' first time he's got his whole disciples together, and he has to give them a speech. This is his first presentation to the disciples. Now, I don't know about you, but if you work in a situation where you're a leader, you know that that first meeting, that first business meeting for the year, or whatever it is, where you're planning, where you're giving directional statements, it's very important. So I liken this to an inauguration speech for a president. And this is what he says: "Go to the lost sheep of Israel. As you go, preach this message. The kingdom of heaven is near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out demons. Freely you have received, freely give." You see, Christ had a real heart for his people and those that were desperately in need. And that's what he commanded his disciples to do. The second text I want to share with you is one that I think this is my favorite text. It's Micah 6:8. And it's, "He has showed you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." Now, this is a text we all know and we all love. This text is about God saying, what's required of us? Have a relationship with God. Love your God. Love your neighbor. Love everyone else. So what does God require of us? To help those in need. The second point I want to share with you is this. Reaching out to your community, it's what God requires of our church. Not just of us as individuals, but of our church. You know, if I look at Christ came to earth to be an example for us today as individuals. He also came to us to be an example to our churches. And I love the book of Mark because the book of Mark talks about Christ's ministry. And it describes Christ's ministry from the perspective of a man of action. You know, it's got every single detail of everything that he did, quite literal. And if you read the book of Mark, what you'll find, and this is just the first chapter of Mark, there's a pattern within his ministry. Jesus preaches in Galilee. He teaches the fishermen, teaches in Capernaum, heals Peter's mother-in-law, preaches throughout Galilee, then heals a man with leprosy. That's just the first chapter. There's a pattern where Christ, he teaches, he preaches, then he heals. He'll cast out demons, and then he'll teach again, he'll preach, and then he'll speak up for the oppressed, he'll speak up for the poor, the poverty-stricken. And this is just chapter 1. This happens throughout the entire book of Mark. And what this tells me is that this is what Christ's ministry looks like. And the question and the challenge to our churches here in North New Zealand is this what our church ministry looks like? Are we preaching, are we teaching as much as meeting the needs of our community? Because Christ's ministry, his day-to-day ministry, was as much about his words as it was about his actions. And the last point I want to share with you very briefly as we establish our case is that reaching out to your community, it's what the community requires of us. Quite simply. You know, we live in a society, especially here in New Zealand, where communities are really hurting, families are hurting, and they're screaming out for assistance, they're screaming out for support. And they're asking the church, not just our church, but all churches. They say, look, you know, you are an organization that preaches about love, but do you love me? And if you love me, what are you doing to help and support my needs? That's what the community requires of us. You know, there's one point that I wanted to put up there, then I realized, no, this should never be the case. And the way I describe this next point is that, and I didn't put it up there and I won't, is that this becomes a byproduct, a fruit of these three things. By doing these three things, do you know what will happen? As a result of doing these three things, we will show people our God. People will see our God through us doing these three things. As a result of these three things, do we have any conference workers here, any ministers? We don't. You're going to love this next statement. By doing these three things, you will fill up every single pew in your church. Now, the reason why I don't want to put this up there is because I don't want to say community outreach, going out there and meeting the needs of your community, is a deliberate strategy for marketing. or a growth strategy for the church. It's not. Meeting the needs of your poor is your Christian God-given responsibility. When you say you love God and you act out on that love, it's not because you want to fill the church. It's because that's what's required of us. And a byproduct of that, a fruit of that, is filling up every single church here in New Zealand. And that's something I'm deeply passionate about. But I haven't put it on there for a reason. This is a picture I want to share with you. This is from a community in Africa, in Zambia. Being an Adra's ministry, I get to go to countries around the world, and I'm just wowed every time I go into these countries. And Zambia is just one of those places. You know, it's a country with so few resources. They have nothing. You know, as a church, they have nothing. But do you know how many members they have in a country of 11.4 million people? They have 586,000. Is that a big number? It is a big number when you think of New Zealand, a country of just over 4 million people. We only have 12,000 Adventists. And it's hard to compare those numbers because the populations are quite different. But New Zealand has a ratio of 1 Adventist to every 400 people in New Zealand. So you'll be lucky to find one in every school in New Zealand. In Zambia, it's 1 out of every 20. You've got an Adventist in every single classroom throughout the entire country. And when I found out about this, I asked myself, why? You know, why in such a country like this with no resources, where one minister is shared amongst 10 churches, how has the ministry just grown? You know, how has our numbers grown to that extent? And the answer is the way they view our church. Because they see the love of God every single day through the work of the church. You see, when they see Adra, when they see me, I'm driving in a nice Adra vehicle and we've got our Adra logo on there. They don't say Adra, they say the Adventists. You know, we've got all these schools throughout Zambia and they have these wonderful Christian names. You know, Mountain View College, you know, things like that. Beautiful names, but guess what people call them? Those Adventists, the Adventist school. Just like we refer to all our clinics as the Adventist clinic. You see, people see us through our services, through the way we meet the needs of our people, and they say that's what that church is about. And because they identify the services of our church, it's because they identify with those services, they just want to learn about what we're about. And I have this firm belief that if we are prepared to meet the physical and emotional needs of people who are most hurting, then they will be prepared for us to meet their spiritual needs. So how do we feel about that? Do we all agree on that case? It's important for us to agree on that case before I move forward. Okay, because this is the platform, and we could have a 2-hour Bible study session about this, but it's important that we establish the why. Okay, the why we need to do this. All right. This is just a report card. I've done a report card. I've been meeting with your conference over the last few months to develop a new strategy for how ADRA can work with local churches here in North New Zealand. And this is what the report card looks like. And this is just a general report card. So this may not be the situation in your local church, but it's a general picture of what we look like in this conference right now. In terms of reaching up, we're doing well. You know, Adventist churches have always been good at focusing on our Father. We're good at reaching across. We're good at reaching across to each other people within our church membership. But in terms of reaching out, going out there beyond the church walls, beyond our church congregations, beyond the families of our church congregations, we're not doing that so well. And while that is a cross, that is we need to improve. Okay? But, you know, how do you depict that with the little symbol? It's we need to improve. In terms of ADRA New Zealand, in 3 years, we've grown our national program. That's all the projects we have in New Zealand, from 17 to 40 across our entire country. We have 36 projects that are implemented directly by our local church. We've increased our funding from $89,000 to $249,000 just for our work right here in New Zealand. And that's only just from one donor. We've established projects from Invercargill to Kaitaia, and that's an important thing for me in my role, because I can say we're a truly national organisation. But we are failing. And we're failing in this area of, we're having growing pains at the moment. Like with any organisation, as they develop a new product and as they progress, as they grow, naturally they're growing pains. And our growing pains exist because, while we're able to grow from 17 to 40 projects, our breadth is like this. If somebody comes up to me and they say, Matt, tell me, what does ADRA do in New Zealand? I would really struggle, because every church does their own project and it looks very different from every other church. It also makes it hard, because then you've got a quality issue. You've got an organisation like ADRA that works with churches and through churches to deliver a service, but how can we be the experts across 40 entirely different projects? It's very hard. Track record. We're not actually developing a track record and expertise in a certain social field. Okay, I can't actually go up to the government and say, we have 120 projects around the country. No, saying if we did have 120 projects. And would you support us? They'll say, well, but what do you do? We've got no track record because we're doing so many different things. I can't say we're solid, we're about this. And because we have no track record, because we have such a wide breadth of projects, we have a PR issue as an organisation, because it's hard to be known about your works when there's so many different things that you do. It's easy for the Salvation Army to be known because they're on every other corner and their service looks exactly the same in Glen Innes than what it would in Kaitaia or in Invercargill. So that's our current state of play. What I'm proposing to the churches, which is what we're discussing with the conferences right now, is that ADRA and the local church partner come together to establish projects that meets the needs of local communities through utilising the infrastructure, capacity and expertise of the local church. And there's one thing that I'm always amazed at when I go to different churches. I've been on a preaching thing at the moment where I've been at Whangarei and then East Auckland and Christchurch last week. And I'm always amazed when I walk into our churches, because they're often in the best locations. Like, I don't know who's been to Whangarei Church. It's right in the city. They have these huge halls and facilities, and I'm thinking, please tell me this church is open every single day of the week, because we're in the best location in the city, and we've got these halls, these kitchens, we've got everything. It's important that ADRA and the churches come together to deliver their services. So this is our proposal. In terms of our vision, our goal is to serve the needs of the community by establishing an ADRA community project in every single local church in New Zealand by 2017. If you wanted to figure on that, there's 120 churches in North New Zealand and 26 churches in South New Zealand. So we're looking at establishing 146 churches around the entire country. What that does for ADRA, I know what it will do for you, but what it will do for ADRA, and this is me speaking quite cleanly, I'll then go to the government and say, do you know who we are? You should, because we're in 146 places around your country delivering services for your people on your behalf. Why don't you support us? So we've got our vision, we've got our goal, but what's our actual purpose? What's that thing that we're actually going to do? Because we can't be a service that meets the needs of people. Whatever you need, we'll help you out. You've got to be more focused than that. You've got to develop a niche, a service. And in developing a service, I adopted this concept called the hedgehog concept. There's this fantastic strategist writer called Jim Collins. And he's got this book, it's called From Good to Great. And he tracks the best organizations in the world. And he came up, this is a 25-year study, and he comes up with this finding that the only reason why these certain organizations were successful was because they had a hedgehog. And that hedgehog is understanding your purpose. So for ADRA, we want to do this exercise. And in understanding your purpose, you've got to understand what you're deeply passionate about. as ADRA and as the local church. We have to understand what can we be the best in the world at as ADRA and the local church. And then the business side, obviously, we have to figure out what drives our economic engine, because as much as I hate saying it, you do need money. So we spent quite a while in identifying what our hedgehog was, and this is what we came up with. Our hedgehog is about strengthening families. How did we come up with this? As a church, we're really passionate about families. As a church that's finding something that we can be the best in the world at, I think of everything that we can provide communities in New Zealand right now, this is what we can do really good at. Our churches are geared up for strengthening families. So we look at the case around strengthening families. Did you know every 7 minutes there's a police call out because of a domestic violence situation? But only 18% of domestic violence cases get reported. There's no one providing a domestic violence program in the entire country. Did you know that? What they do is they come in and they assist families after there's been an issue. But there's nothing in there about prevention. 1/3 of all marriages in New Zealand end in divorce. Well, we kind of knew that. New Zealand has the 3rd highest rate of single-parent households in the OECD. Now, families are the gatekeepers of tomorrow. It's a fact, you know. They're the ones that bring up our children. Our children are going to be the ones driving our economy and social standing heading into the future. So if we look at children, what do we have? 22% of children in New Zealand are living below the poverty line. That's 1 in 5. I couldn't believe that stat when I read it. You know, I work in developing countries. I've worked in most countries throughout Africa and Asia and the Pacific. I've seen what poverty looks like. And then I come to my own home country, New Zealand, which is a developed country, and I find out that 1 out of every 5 children in your classroom is living below the poverty line. And just lastly, you know, children who grow up below the poverty line have a higher chance of leaving school with no qualifications, premarital pregnancies, and making contact with the justice system, as well as high unemployment, which is something that we kind of know, but it's backed up by research and data. So in understanding the landscape of families in New Zealand, it's pretty clear there is a need there. And in understanding this vehicle, which is the Adventist Church, it's pretty clear what we're good at and what we can provide. And it's a great fit for ADRA, because this is what we're about. We're about empowering families. So how will it work? We're developing a program where we will establish a pool of funds. We're going to establish a funding pool for local churches to access so they can run a project. Remember, we want every single church in the next 5 years to have an ADRA project. Local churches will apply for a project within the project menu, in which they will need to provide match funding. Okay, and I'll share a little bit about that after. And the last step is obviously local churches will implement projects with the support of ADRA. So this is the model that we'll be introducing. Our project menu, this will be delivered in consultation, developed in consultation with the Family Ministries Department and industry professionals. So our challenge now, before the end of the year, is to get some high-flying social workers, development workers who understand our church as well, and then come up with the best projects. We're only looking for about 3 of them that our churches right here in New Zealand can deliver on. Because there's no point developing a great project if it doesn't match the capacity of your church. You know, we can only run as fast as our churches allow us to. Okay, so no, let's not develop a project where you need a trained accountant, 2 school teachers, and somebody that's been in business management for 5 years. So we're going to be developing a program that meets the capacity of our local churches. The projects will be designed in such a way, the projects will be designed with the figure of around $10,000 per project. Okay, we're looking at our churches and we're thinking, if we have to take stock, you know, we've got great facilities already. We just got to provide extra for some of those services. And I already touched that. We'll be looking at 3 projects. Now, the reason why we're pushing for match funding is because By the way, who's currently got an Agile project at their church? Okay, I'm speaking to the right people there. Who's got an Agile project at their church? Okay. The reason why we're introducing match funding is because we want to ensure accountability and buy-in. Now, I've been in this game for a long time. At the moment, we have 40 projects in this country. We're funding everything, every single cost of those projects. The projects are good, but the issue I have is this. It's run off the back of 2 or 3 passionate people within a local church who, if they leave New Zealand for some reason, or if they walk in front of a bus and they get hit, that project will be dead. But if that project has ownership from the local church, where they discussed it and they consulted together, they took a business case to the board approved it, and then they paid half of it out of their own pocket, that project will never die, because when it's your own money, you're that much more motivated to run a good project and to get those outcomes. So that's a model that we're pushing for. And we'll match a maximum of $5,000 per project. So what are our roles and responsibilities? Well, for ADRA, we're going to develop that project menu, ready by the end of the year. We're also going to establish a funding pool. And to begin with, looking at the value of around $300,000 to start this within your local churches. And we're going to provide support of 1.5 staff members and resources to each local church. In terms of the churches, what I want you guys to do is you need to assess the needs of your local community. We're going to develop a menu of 3 different types of projects, entirely different, because we're also going to look at the demographics of where our churches are in those types of communities. Okay, there's some communities that will need support in, say, domestic violence and meeting the direct physical needs. And then there's some communities that just need to figure out work, life, health, family balance, that stuff. Okay, so we're going to develop a project menu that meets the needs of all our churches and all our communities where all our churches are based across the entire country. So you need to identify those needs. You need to assess the capability and capacity of the local church to deliver these projects with a long-term view. Now, I say this, when I was working in Australia, we have about 300 projects across the country. And I get really upset when we work with these churches for about 2 years to develop this fantastic project that for some reason falls apart because of lack of interest, because they didn't have no longer-term view. Okay, you have to have a long-term view. And the board of local churches have to apply to ADRA to establish a project. So we're no longer going to be dealing with individuals that say, I have this great, fantastic idea. We want to deal with your local board so we get buy-in from your church. In terms of ADRA's investment, how do we see this moving forward? We've been praying about this for a long time. Now, ADRA as an organisation, we've done well over the years, and it's not because we have deep pockets. We don't. We're fortunate to have a government that really values our expertise. In fact, we have the most projects of any other NGO, international aid provider in the entire country. We have 14. We have more than World Vision, Oxfam, CARE, Plan, you name it. We have the most. Whenever a project comes out for Samoa, for Fiji, for Mongolia, for Thailand, guess whose door they're knocking on first? ADRA. Do you have capacity? Okay, so we've been very blessed in that respect. But we don't have deep pockets. The government, fortunately for us, the government has helped us fund a lot of that work. We're going to put in $300,000 this year to start this program, and we're going to grow it to $600,000 in the next 5 years. Don't ask me how I'm going to come up with this money, but this is at the top of our prayer list at the moment, because we know that if we're going to do this with our local churches, we're just asking our churches, come up with capacity, bring your passion to the table and your need to support your local community, and we'll come up with a lot of the dollars. So where to from here? ADRA will continue to work with the conference, union and industry professionals to establish the program. ADRA will design 3 projects for its project menu, which you know, And we're looking at launching the program in North New Zealand, B Camp, come January. So that's our goal moving forward. Do we have any questions? Yep. Hang on, sorry, I've got a mic for you. I've got to be good. There you
go. I do a fair bit of work in the community now.
Yeah.
And in certain areas that I'm coming into clusters of young men between 18 and 25 that have no skills. Mm-hmm. They spend their days drinking and smoking. Yeah. If we had something that could re-educate them in mechanical skills, carpentry skills, teaching them how to run a budget and how not to smoke because it kills their health. The alcohol causes fights between them and their partners because what's happening is the single partners that you're talking about are normally partners of the guys that are in these groups. And the groups haven't yet turned into gangs, but it's only a matter of time. And there are very few working in them.
So we need to develop interventions to support these kids as they go through that. But imagine if we had a family program that dealt with those at-risk behaviours before it even happened, because we strengthened the home.
That's a good place to go, but when it's cross-cultural, it takes years to get that started. We've already got that young age group that has started. For example, I've bought one, I'll rephrase that. I've dealt with one guy that's converted a car, and before he's even done for the first car, he's going for the second. He's now praying, now wants to give up smoking and drink. All it takes is the people that are called to go and touch people's hearts.
That's right. Absolutely right. And you said it, that's what's required from our churches. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, let me share a story with you. This is my friend Andrew. Andrew, you know Andrew, don't you? You're involved in this project. We have a project run at a Calvary Community Church in Manuera. We're all familiar with Manuera, right? Okay, pretty rough area. And we run believe it or not, we run a kickboxing school. A few people have laughed. We run a kickboxing school. And this kickboxing school is it's a place where we invite people to come. And the people that come to this school are ex-offenders that have come out of prison. The people that come here are gangsters, are people that have left school and who are just, who are offending. Okay, so they're at risk of going into prison. So we invite them to this program where they come and they get to hit a bag, they get to punch pads, they pretty much hit themselves out. So by the time they go home, they're not going to be hitting their wives or their kids. Or they're not going to be walking down the street into the neighbouring suburb and picking fights with other gangs. And that was the intention of this project when it was first started. Now it's moved on to a point where every time they run a session, straight after, there's going to be a course. So they can learn a course on anger. They'll be on a course, like an anger management course, a stress management course. There's going to be a course here on communication. You know, a lot of the time when people are having conflict or issues, it's because they don't know how to communicate. It's because they can't communicate what's on their mind and why they're so angry. Then they find other avenues to express that frustration. Family budgeting, there's so many different elements to these courses that they run out of Manuera. And this guy, Andrew, as you can see, he's got a Black Power t-shirt on. He's from the Black Power gang. He's been in the gang for over 20 years. He just came out of prison a year ago. And he's been on police detention for 12 months. So he's had this anklet around his ankle. So he can't actually leave his property. So he comes in contact with what I call the guy from across the road, and because he can't leave his property, and they start talking. The guy from across the road was an Adventist involved in this project and said, Andrew, why don't you come along to our project, and meet some other guys, hit some pads. So he agreed, and they had to write a special letter to the police to get him released from his home for 2 nights a week. So he starts coming to this course. And not after too long, his whole life starts to change. Because he For the first time, Andrew had met people outside of the Black Power gang. This guy had been in the gang for over 20 years. Now he's got friends that are showing him a different life, a new way of life, are questioning him, saying, how about family? How important is that to you? It's not just about the booze. It's not just about hanging out with your mates. There's other things that we need to live for in our life. So he goes on this journey, and he's learned so much. He's also accepted Christ as his Lord and Savior. He's one of the first to put up his hands and pray for the group before they start their training. He requested Bible studies in his home. Of course, in his home, because he couldn't leave to do Bible studies, so they had to come to him. What saddens me about Andrew is that we don't see Andrew anymore. Andrew's now left the project. You see, as soon as he finished his 12 months of home detention, he had his assessment by SIFS. SIFS looked at this guy and they said, "Man, you're not the same guy we first saw. You're a different man." As a result of those meetings, they decided, no, this guy's ready to be a dad again. He's now got his kids back. He hadn't seen his kids for over 4 years, and now he has his kids back. Praise God. The day he gets his kids back, he also reconciles with his partner. He approaches the Black Power gang and he says, "Guys, this is it. Today's my last day in the gang. Now, I'm not sure about you. I don't know too many things about gangs, but you can't just leave a gang. Okay, there are processes and protocols that happen, and you often get pulled out in an ambulance." The gang said, "No, we accept that. Go be a dad." So now he's moved to Wellington, where he started a new life for him and his family. What's that, sorry? He returned his patch, that's right. He returned his patch. And that's an example of how a little project like this little thing called Adra could transform the life of somebody in our community that will then transform the life of the entire community, because they all see that. A gang like the Black Power are looking at this guy and thinking, who are these Adventist people again? Because they really changed you. I know what you're like. I know what you used to be like. And I'm sharing the story with you today because I want you to really understand what could happen if you put yourself out there as a loving Christian, as a loving Adventist, prepared to meet the needs of your local community. Amazing things like this will happen. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.